Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by and welcome to part 3. Now I know these plants are coming in what appears to be a totally random order, but they're getting filmed in the order I water them in, whatever that is. So they're all mixed up and jumbled, and I think that might actually make for better videos than all the same at once. But talking of all the same at once, these are all the same. This is one type of Disa, this Disa cuensis, and basically these very rarely get taken out to be filmed, but I like to take them out to water these. Now these get watered, believe it or not, once every 3 or 4 waterings. Very, very low level. That's a TDS of 40, next to nothing, and that's what they like. You get any salt build up in the media, their roots go. So these are very, very sensitive at the below ground area. And how I water these is I top the trays up, and then I wait for that water to disappear, and then I top the tray up again. These can actually stand in water and they'll be happy, but I don't leave them standing in water for too long. I let them soak up one tray full and then top the tray up and wait for that to totally disappear, which takes a couple of days. So that's that. This was 3 plants, it's now at least 6. I don't know what I'm going to do with all these, but I've got 2 good spikes coming on here, and this one is starting its spike. So all 3 of those larger ones are going to bloom. Now out of the next size down, there's definitely 1 spike. That was the first spike to form, and there may be more in that pot, I'm not sure, but I'm happy that one of them is going to bloom. And then there's the little community pot of what were the little plantlets. Let me see if I can show you one there. So you can see the main plant, and then it grows little plantlets out of the side. Well, that's what these were when they were taken off. They were just little plants like that, and they're growing on quite nicely. So there's a little community pot, and if none of those bloom, they can stay in that pot and they'll bloom next year. So that's the Disas. I've only got 1 type. I plan to get more. These are not difficult, they're just different. These are my 3 Brassavola types, all of which went downhill during last year, badly in some cases. This is a hybrid, Brassavola David Sanders. This has a lovely strong new growth coming now. I was hoping for more than 1, and there's probably going to be another one down in there somewhere soon. And I'll see how it does from there, but that came off of a mount and I'm trying it in a pot. This is Brassavola nodosa. This bloomed in the winter, even though the plant was very unhappy. I still don't think it's that happy, because that's not a good new growth, but that is. And it's starting to produce some new root activity in places, so maybe that'll do better in a pot. The good ones I've seen of Brassavola nodosa, nearly all of them have been in pots, so it's got to be worth a try. And this one was Brassavola glauca, is now Laelia glauca, and this is allowed to be in the Why Won't You Bloom, because I know exactly why it won't bloom. The light level this needs I'm probably never going to get here in the UK in my grow room, but this plant just rotted, and I managed to just cut off one of the leads and save it, so it's got quite an abrupt cut on it, and I mounted it to see what it would do and see if the rot would spread. Well, it stopped, and it's going mad with the roots now, and as a consequence it's got 2 leads on it. It should produce some new growth soon. The last 2 new growths are smaller than they should be, but they're plump and they were winter growths, so it's certainly growing. It's a mass of new roots, but I'm not sure why I keep that, because the chances of me getting that to bloom are pretty slim. I just can't. You know, the winter light levels here are atrocious compared with what this would get in the wild where it comes from. But it's growing well. These 2 Cattleya hybrids are just unnamed hybrids, and they're both the same plant effectively, even though they look quite different. They both bloomed back in the winter and are both producing a single new growth at the moment. This is a much nicer looking plant. It's upright, the leaves aren't in bad condition, and I mean, if you look at it, it's bloomed on every single growth. But it now has a strong new growth. It's going to be a bit aerial above the media, but that doesn't matter. This pushes out long, strong new roots. So whatever roots come off of this area, they'll go straight down in the media anyway. And half of them go down and come straight out again. This one's a more tatty looking one. The bulbs have gone all over the place, even though it's the same plant. But again, a single new growth on that one to push on and get to bloom. And this one, again, has quite a good root system. So even though the older bulbs on this look desiccated, it's because they desiccated before they were put in the holy clay pots. And they've just never plumped up. And that's the case with Cattleyas sometimes. If they get too far gone, they will not plump up, despite having roots. But this one's got potential for a second lead. Maybe. We'll have to wait and see. That's those two. And this is Bulbophyllum Elizabeth Ann, variety Buckleberry. And this is quite a few plants in a single pot. I decided to just chuck them all in together and just produce a big pot full. There were several back bulbs that were taken off that decided to sprout, so viable new plants, even though they've only got one bulb and a new growth, and the other couple of parts were just thrown in as well. There's a lot of new growths in here. We've got one here that's coming on quite nicely. There's a new one down here, another new one down here, and there are others that are in a more mature state in amongst the sea of green round the back there. But these were difficult to get in the pot. A lot of them, you know, the roots are a little bit above the pot because of the shape of the rhizomes, but it's just going to have to get on with it, basically. You know, roots that get down in there, great. Those that don't will be aerial. I mean, it was hanging out the side of the pot anyway, so those roots were aerial then, and they got a much better chance of getting down in the pot in that pot. Deliberately planted low, two reasons. One, to try and keep the flipping thing in the pot and stop it climbing out, and two, because they're shallow rooted anyway. So serves two purposes. But that pot is incredibly soft clay and it really soaks the moisture out of the media. So this one, as a holy clay pot, needs watering quite a lot more often than the others. Plus these shouldn't really go totally dry, as opposed to the Cattleya types in the holy clay pot. So this one's a little bit of work at the moment, you know, with the heat we're getting. It needs watering quite often, and it takes a lot of water to water that as well. Now, this is quite a recent gift, this one. This is Brassavola Laelia, or it might not be, because a lot of the Laelias have changed, and some of the Brassavolas have as well. But that's what it's on the tag, and that's what it's staying as at the moment. Now this one has all sorts of stages on it. It's got some new immature growths, it's got some bloomed growths, it's got a dead one in the middle there. Actually, it's got a couple of dead ones that can come off when I get round to it. It's got signs of new root activity in places up near the top, and there is some down in the pot as well. And this is another one that's in a different type of holy clay pot to my normal ones, and it's soft clay. So this one takes a bit of hydrating as well. It's getting watered twice as often as my original holy clay pots to try and keep it hydrated. And a lot of the roots were not papery and dead, but desiccated. And I think they are starting to plump up slowly but surely. So at that point they may start to branch. It's still got a good root system irrespective of the state of the roots, and it does show signs of some new ones growing. How long that'll be before I get a growth that's capable of blooming, I don't know, because it's difficult to say which are the new ones. The older ones that have bloomed are obvious, but it's difficult to say which are the maturing growths and which of those are actually older ones that just didn't bloom. So I'm just going to have to wait with this and see what happens with it. But it's relatively new at the moment, so we'll see how that one gets on. I thought I'd do both the Laelias together. This is Laelia Anceps. This produced two medium-sized growths, certainly not as large as they can be, but they both bloomed. So more than happy with that. And they did that on quite a poor root system. But those two growths have now produced good root systems under both of them, and they both now have a new growth. That one's just starting and this one's just pushing on. And there's no reason why those shouldn't bloom when they mature. I'd like to have seen a couple more, but two will do. It's still quite a small plant, really. And this is a giant. This is an absolutely massive plant, and it has a tendency to lean. This is Laelia purpurata variety Atropurpurea. A lot of purple in there. But this one was blooming size. It has bloomed, yeah? But it was then a division, which means it might not be. That's what happens. But these were the three large leaves, and this one, when I got it. It then produced these two new growths, both of which have signs of a sheath, but no sign of them pushing on or doing anything yet. And both of those new leads now have new growths. So we've got a nice strong one coming out this side, and another one that hasn't long started on the other side. So it's turning into quite a large plant. And even if these two that I grew last year don't bloom, there's no reason why I shouldn't get blooms on at least one of these. It now has the strength to do that. So providing the rest of the environment that it likes is okay, then it should bloom. But that's this year's growths, pushing these two on, getting them to full size. That's the job in hand. And this is a big and a small. This is my largest Cattleya. It is very large, and a recovering medium-sized one. That one's never going to get too big. You know, this is roughly the size of the leaves, maybe a little larger. This one is Cattleya Angel Heart. It bloomed on this growth, which I produced, and it was a good length as far as a bulb was concerned, but this is strictly speaking a bifolia. It only produced one leaf, so it wasn't up to full strength, whereas the growth that's coming on now is definitely going to be bifoliate. Will be by far the largest growth that it's ever had on this plant, and hopefully that means more blooms when it does bloom. But that is its only new growth. That's where it will bloom next. I'd like to see another new growth push on somewhere on that, but that's just a wait and see. But this one's pushing on nicely, good strong healthy growth, and it will bloom when it matures. So that's good. This little one is, I've had trouble with this for years. I still keep hanging on to it because I like the blooms. Don't like giving up on this one because I like the blooms. It's classed as an SC, Sophrocatleya, but there aren't many Sophronitis left now. They're nearly all been moved to Cattleyas or somewhere else, so I doubt if it's an SC, but it's Rose Pixie Pinafore. Two bits of plant in here. This bit over here is not doing very well and may never grow. It might just stall and just never progress. This piece, however, has pushed out some good roots, and it now has quite a strong new growth. So I know I've got one piece recovering, even if the other piece just gets pulled out because it doesn't grow. But yeah, I mean, it's blooming size, but it's never had a good root system. It's always struggled, so all of these sheaths are just blanks. Yeah, but maybe this one, maybe that one will bloom. We'll have to wait and see. This is an oddity. This is Bifrenaria harrisoniae, and it's in the why won't you bloom category. This was growing in two directions, but I could never hydrate it properly on the mount. So I think towards the end of last year, it had just grown this growth and this growth, so one each end, so in theory it was growing in two directions. But to try and get some hydration into it, I thought I'll chuck the whole mount because I didn't want to disturb it. It's so well attached. I just thought I'll sink the mount itself into the pot and see what happens. Well, what's actually happened is some very good root growth down in the pot. So the roots have come off the mount now and are now mainly growing in the pot. So it has a much, much better root system now than it's ever had, albeit now stuck in the pot. But then it grew this massive bulb in the winter. A beauty. But still no blinking blooms and no sign of any. So all I keep doing with this is water and feed it and see what happens. But I'm surprised this lead stopped. You know, it was going quite happily in two directions, and then this end stopped and this end grew this massive bulb. So all I can do is watch and wait. Well, this is a good pair to put together. just the names. This little one here with the beautiful orange blooms and the deep red in the frilly lip, which I love. This has got a name 8 foot long. Shin Fong, Little Sun, Young Min, Golden Boy. This one, hybrid. Two opposites. Anyway, progress on this. This one has a good root system down in the pot. It's got a single new growth at the moment, following it blooming on this big strong new growth. I'd like to see some of those back eyes push on that one, but I don't know whether that's going to happen. That's a wait and see. I mean, there's one there that's possible, another one here even possible, but certainly one on the way anyway, so that's the one to watch. This little one here, this didn't have a very good root system, but it has now. It's pushed on quite a few new roots on here, and this one does have a new growth on one of its other leads, and it's highly likely it might do it there as well, although I can't see it yet. And then it's still got its main lead here, which is the one that's just bloomed. So this one could have multiple new growths on it, but it's always a wait and see with Cattleyas. Sometimes those dormant eyes just sit there and never do anything, and other times they just all burst out all at once, so it's a wait and see. We'll see how we get on with those two. This is one of the larger Cattleyas, Young Min Orange, and was in bloom for quite a while back in the winter with a really good show, so I'm pleased with this plant. It's also a nice looking Cattleya. Most of the leaves on there are in very good condition. Unfortunately, there's an outbreak of the crawler stage of some scale when I picked this up. So loads and loads of tiny little white things at the base of the plant. So I can't water this at the moment, it's just had a good spray with alcohol. That crawler stage don't survive the evaporation of the alcohol. The adults might because of their waxy coating, but the youngsters don't. But if there's youngsters, there's some bloody adults in there somewhere. Anyway, plant-wise, I'm hoping that at least one of those two eyes is going to grow. Both of these are, so that's 2 leads, possibly 3 or 4, and then round here we have another one coming out. So a good number of new leads, and so far with this plant every new lead has bloomed. So if that can push up 4 or 5 new ones, that should be yet another good show. Varnagara Apple Blossom, currently in bloom. Not the healthiest looking plant, but I managed to burn this one, and so the older leaves are tatty. My fault. But currently the big fat bulb that's blooming has 1, 2 eyes on it. I'd love to see both of those push. It'd be nice to see one come out farther back as well. But if I can get both of those to go together, then we get 2 new growths to do that. Probably near the same time as well. So that's my hope for that one, is to get both of those new growths to push on. One of them definitely will. Whether both will or not, we'll have to wait and see. There's a little group of Oncidium types here. This is Oncostelli Wildcat Cheetah. Will be in bloom shortly. Looking forward to that. Very weak plant, but the pseudo bulb that it grew, which is the one that's about to bloom, is big and fat and plump, and it has a reasonable root system. If it wasn't in that state, I'd have taken that flower spike off and waited for the next growth. But that's been repotted recently. That can sit there, it can bloom, and then it can produce its next growth or growths without being disturbed. So that'll be good. This is the Oncidium Twinkle, the yellow one. This stayed in its pot a bit too long, but it was in the process of a mass blooming and I wanted to get it in a show. And it did actually get a first, so it was worth doing. But unfortunately that meant, some of the roots started to go over. But it's now coming back into growth. It's got several new growths on it. There's one pushing up there. There's another one here. I think there's a third one somewhere. Yeah, another one down in there. So this one's coming back into growth now, and having been repotted again, that can sit there, mature those growths and establish a decent root system and stay there for a bit now. The other one that's currently in bloom is, I was going to say one of my Sharry babies, but it's actually two. There's two plants in that pot, and once this bloom spike is over, both of the pieces, the other piece has already bloomed, this one's now blooming, and as soon as I see the signs of the new growths on that and some roots, that'll get split into two separate plants and maybe a couple of the older bulbs taken off, and effectively that'll rejuvenate it. That's actually been in its pot a while, it could do with coming out. But I'll wait for the right time, wait for those new growths and signs of new roots, and then get it in some fresh media, and it can then stay there for a while undisturbed. Well, this is Dendrobium wedding bells that was sold to me as a nobly type, and although I agree it's probably got an amount of nobly in it, I don't think it's a lot. The giveaway is the time of year it blooms, yeah, and in addition to that, the way the spikes actually grow. Noblies don't tend to grow spikes, they tend to have a little cluster of buds next to the cane. So it's wrong in many counts. Time of year it blooms and the style of the spikes. But nonetheless, it's about to bloom. It's got stacks of buds all over it. That's going to be a nice show. And this time I'll remember to take a picture. It's also got plenty of new roots coming out at the moment, and it's just coming back into active growth. But again, it is geared up. That's one thing it does do a bit like a nobly. The new growths tend to come either with or just after the blooms. So that is sticking to the pattern by starting its new growths about now. But it doesn't start them in a late winter, early spring. It starts them now, you know, as we're heading in towards summer basically. So it's a strange one, this one. Well, this is Psychopsis Mendenhall Hildos, and it's not doing well. I think that's reasonably obvious. Its leaves are in a state, it hasn't grown a new bulb for a long time, and it lost all its roots. Well, it is just showing signs of some new roots growing, so maybe I can save it, but this plant is sorry for itself. Nonetheless, it continues to bloom, and it's going to do that shortly, and this bud is pushing on. It's only got one spike on it. The leaves are in a state, it's not a happy plant, and probably many reasons. First of all, if I left it out here in the winter, it would be far too cold, so it came in the house to give it some warmth. But unfortunately in the house it didn't get the humidity it likes. So I don't think I'm ever going to do that well with Psychopsis. I can't leave them out here, it's far too cold, and if I take them in the house I lose the humidity, so it's hanging on, that's all I can say. It would be good to see a new bulb this year and, you know, at least get a root system going, but yeah, very, very weak plant that's been static for a very long time. It hasn't grown any new growths or a new spike or anything for ages now. It just sits there looking like that. Doesn't seem to be getting any worse, but, you know, that's that one. This is a couple of kikis of Dendrobium Spring Dreamer pollen, which is a nobly type, and I'm hoping to see some new growths coming on this soon. But I was surprised that it actually bloomed, and the blooms have lasted quite well. But yeah, I need new growths and new roots on this. It has a root system, that's not a problem, but it's you know, I need those new growths, and it's late in the season for them to be starting, so they need to get a move on. Now this little Dendrobium, I got this last year, so the blooms that are about to be will be my first blooms myself. It was in bloom when I got it. It's a cross, primary cross, Infundibulum crossed with Laelia, and you can see the size of the plant, and the blooms are huge, and they are stunning. I'm really looking forward to those coming back again. But this is a summer bloomer. So it's a different type of Dendrobium. It's done a mass of roots recently, and that hasn't been repotted. But I know the guy I got it from, and he pots with probably half of the pot is grit, and the other half is bark. So I'm going to leave that. I'm going to leave it basically until I see some new growths. But another one, it matures its canes and then does a massive root spurt. So it does grow a little different to some of the others, but really looking forward to the blooms on that. Both of these new canes should bloom. Don't see why not. although that one hasn't actually got a bud on it, but this one has, so there will be some blooms. Now, this is the giant Dendrobium prima donna, nobly type. It's just finished flowering. I've just taken the last few off, although I have noticed another bud. Nuisance. I got some real thinking to do with this. This got best hybrid in show, but it's not going to do anything like that next year. I can tell. I've had this plant a long time. This plant is very, very tired. Very tired. It's currently starting some new growths and some new roots, and it's got a centre to it with older canes that have been taken off, and I think quite honestly that would do better if it was just cut down the middle and start 2 new plants in much smaller pots and try and get some energy back into it. I think it's just exhausted itself over the years. It's bloomed 3 consecutive years at sort of award level. And it did grow beautiful canes last year, but they're not happy. They have desiccated a bit, and that wasn't lack of water in the winter because it got its appropriate trickles of water. It's just exhausted. It just needs basically rejuvenating. So I'm going to have a good think about that one. I'm certainly not going to lose it, but I think it might do better if it was split and just start these new growths again. We'll see how I go with that. I'm still thinking. Well, these two are, this one's Miltonidium Peter Comp, lovely fragrant flowers on it, and it's 2 plants, one each side. This one's maturing, that should come into bloom soon. Oh, just to prove the point, there's a spike. I hadn't seen that. And the other new growth's a bit behind at this end. That has bloomed on every single growth it's produced since I had it. And that was one of the ones, this rejuvenation idea, where you get so many leafless back bulbs, which this one will be soon. Do we worry about leaves on old bulbs? No, they die. That's how it happens. But when you've got more back bulbs than growths with leaves on, it's time to have a think about what I call rejuvenating the plant. And providing you take those older back bulbs off, not necessarily all of them, but some of them, and that'll allow you to keep it within a reasonable sized pot. As long as you've got new roots growing, it's a good time to do it. And when I did this one, I ended up with 2 leads, so 2 plants. Next time I repot that, which will be down the line a bit because it hasn't long been done, they'll be separated out and become 2 plants, and maybe take another back bulb off to get it in its pot. This is Miltonia Sunset, and this is, I can't even count the number of new growths on here. I think there's 5. And again, this blooms on every new growth it produces. It always has. Last time it finished blooming, it was repotted. It's generated a massive root system. Half of them are up in the air. Most of them are in the pot, which is good. And this should be coming into bloom soon. It's like digging into a jungle trying to find spikes on this one. Yeah, there's a spike down in there. Right down at the base. So that'll be coming into bloom soon as well. So that's those 2 biggies.